I remember the exact moment when the world cracked open for me, like a frozen lake giving way underfoot. 4 pairs of Siberian husky eyes, wild and pleading, staring out from a snowbank as if they'd been waiting their whole lives for someone to notice. It was the kind of cold that bites into your soul. The night I almost drove past the miracle that saved us both. You know how some days just unfold quietly, like they're scripted by the weather, each flake a quiet actor in the scene, building tension without fanfare or dramatic cues. That winter evening in the backwoods of upstate New York, where the hills roll like forgotten waves under a blanket of white that muffles all sound and turns the landscape into a dreamlike hush, I was heading home from a dead-end shift at the diner, the kind where you smile through the grease and small talk, but feel the emptiness gnawing inside, a constant companion like the chill seeping through the door every time a customer left, their tips clinking loosely in the jar that never seemed to fill fast enough. The air hung heavy with the scent of pine needles sharp against the damp earth, mingled with the faint exhaust from my truck's rumbling engine that carried a hint of oil and age, and my wipers slapped rhythmically against the windshield, fighting the relentless flakes that piled up on the glass like unshed tears, obscuring the view ahead and forcing me to lean closer to peer through the streaks. I'd lost my husband to the bottle a year before, his absence leaving echoes in every corner of our lives, from the empty chair at dinner that no one sat in to the unanswered questions that lingered in the air like smoke from a dying fire. And my little girl, Emma, was growing up too fast in that cramped apartment with its peeling wallpaper and single window overlooking the parking lot littered with discarded cans, asking questions I couldn't answer about why daddies sometimes disappear into the fog of their own making. Her voice small but insistent, probing the wounds I tried to hide. The snow was coming down in thick, relentless sheets, turning the road into a white blur that swallowed the edges of the world, erasing the familiar landmarks until everything felt suspended in uncertainty, the taillights of rare passing cars vanishing like ghosts into the swirling void. My old pickup truck groaned against the wind, its tires slipping slightly on the icy patches hidden beneath the fresh layer, the dashboard lights flickering as if protesting the effort with a weary glow, headlights cutting through the dark like hesitant whispers probing the unknown, illuminating brief glimpses of twisted branches heavy with frost that bowed low over the path, their tips brushing the snow like fingers reaching out. I wasn't looking for anything profound. Just a hot meal warmed over the stove with whatever was left in the fridge, perhaps canned soup or toast if we were lucky, and a bed to collapse into, maybe a moment to scroll through the old photos on my phone before sleep claimed me. Those faded images of happier times that now felt like relics from another life, stirring a pang I tried to ignore but couldn't quite shake. But life, I guess, has a way of throwing curveballs when you're not paying attention, reminding you that the ordinary can pivot into something extraordinary with just a glance off the path. Much like those real-life tales from rural rescues, where a simple detour uncovers hidden lives waiting to be acknowledged, turning strangers into saviors in the most unexpected ways. Bonds forged in the freeze. As I rounded that sharp bend near the old logging trail, where the trees leaned in like silent sentinels guarding secrets from a bygone era of lumberjacks and steam trains rattling through the wilderness with loads of timber, something caught my eye off to the side, a flicker in the periphery that pulled at my focus despite the storm's distraction and the fatigue weighing on my eyelids. At first I thought it was a trick of the light, maybe a fallen branch tangled in the underbrush or a deer caught in the storm, its form blurred by the swirling white that danced like ghosts in the beams, antlers casting erratic shadows that played tricks on the mind. But no, there, half buried in a drift that had piled up against a cluster of boulders worn smooth by decades of weathering and rain, their surfaces etched with lichen like ancient runes, was a cluster of shapes moving faintly, like shadows stirring in the whiteout, desperate and alive against the indifferent vastness of the night that stretched unbroken. I slowed the truck, heart picking up a notch in my chest, a flutter of unease mixing with curiosity that made my palms sweat despite the cold gripping the steering wheel, sending a shiver up my arms. And that's when I saw them clearly. 4 huskies, pure Siberian beauties with those piercing blue eyes that look right through you, their thick double coats matted with ice and mud, crystals forming along their whiskers and lashes like delicate jewelry forged in hardship, their forms etched against the snow in stark relief. They were huddled together in a tight knot for warmth, bodies intertwined in a survival pact that spoke of deep familial ties passed through generations. The smallest one, a pup, really, no more than a few months old, with ears too big for her frame and paws that splayed awkwardly in the powder, tucked against the flank of what seemed like the mother, her body curved protectively around the vulnerable form, shielding it from the worst of the gusts that tore through the open space with relentless force. The other 2, sleek and strong like they were built for the wild trails of the Arctic, pressed close on either side, their shoulders touching in solidarity, breaths coming in visible puffs that rose and mingled in the frigid air, each exhale a testament to their fading strength, their chests rising and falling in labored unison, frost gathering on their muzzles. Who leaves dogs like that out here, in the middle of nowhere where the nearest town is miles away over unplowed roads that twist like veins? Huskies aren't your average strays wandering urban alleys in search of scraps from dumpsters. They're bred for the sled, for loyalty that runs deeper than blood, with an endurance that turns blizzards into mere adventures. Descendants of the hardy Chukchi sled dogs that pulled families across frozen tundras for generations. Their history intertwined with indigenous survival in Siberia's extremes, where every step was a battle against the white. Someone had dumped them, plain and simple, probably figuring the snow would do the rest, erasing them from the landscape as if they were nothing more than forgotten baggage tossed from a passing vehicle. A heartless act that echoed stories I'd heard from animal control officers about rural abandonments spiking in winter, when holiday pressures lead to desperate choices that haunt the quiet nights. I pulled over, the engine idling rough in the oppressive silence broken only by the howl of the wind, rattling the bare branches and whistling through the truck's seams like a mournful tune, and stepped out into the blizzard, my boots sinking into the powder up to my ankles with a soft crunch that echoed in my ears. The cold hit me like a slap across the face, seeping through my thin jacket and numbing my fingers in seconds, the kind of freeze that makes your lungs ache with every breath, drawing in air sharp as glass shards that burned on the way down. But those eyes, God, those eyes held me there, unblinking and full of a raw, unspoken plea that transcended words, pulling me forward against my better judgment, as if they were magnets to the compassion buried under my weariness. The mother husky lifted her head first, her gaze steady, not aggressive, but desperate, like she was sizing me up in that instinctive way animals do, deciding if I was the one worth trusting with her family's fate, her posture tense yet open, muscles coiled beneath the fur ready for flight or fight. Her coat was silver gray, dusted white now from the storm, with that classic black mask around her face that made her look wise, almost ancient, like she'd seen too many harsh winters and carried their lessons in her stance. Her muzzle flecked with age that hinted at stories untold of runs across endless plains. She didn't bark or lunge forward. She just watched, her body language screaming protection over her little pack, her ears slightly pinned back against the gusts that tugged at her fur, sending ripples through it like waves on a disturbed pond. The others followed suit, the 2 adults with their curled tails held low and alert ears pricked toward me, catching every subtle shift in my movement. The pup shivering so hard, its ribs showed through the soft undercoat beneath the fur, her whimpers faint but piercing, cutting through the wind like a child's cry carried on the breeze. I remember thinking, This isn't my problem, Sarah. Drive on. Get home safe before the roads close and you're stranded too, with Bill's waiting and Emma alone. But my feet wouldn't move, rooted by an invisible thread that tugged at something deep within, a dormant empathy stirring. Something in me, that hollow part where grief had settled like a heavy stone, stirred awake, as if their vulnerability mirrored my own hidden fractures, reminding me of how I'd felt discarded after Tom's departure, left to navigate my own storm with no map or compass, the parallels too stark to ignore. "Hey there," I said softly, my voice swallowed by the wind that whipped around us, carrying flecks of snow that stung my cheeks like tiny needles, forcing me to squint against the assault. I crouched down a few feet away, keeping my movements slow and deliberate to avoid spooking them, my knees sinking into the powdery drift that gave way like fresh sugar, cold seeping through my jeans and chilling my skin. The mother tilted her head slightly, her blue eyes locking onto mine. Huskies have that stare, you know? It's like they're reading your secrets, pulling at the threads of your loneliness with an intelligence that's almost human, a trait bred into them for guiding mushers through whiteouts where visibility fails, and trust is the only light. She let out a low whine, not frantic but urgent, almost conversational, nudging the pup closer to the edge of the drift with her muzzle, as if urging me to see the tiniest one first, her nose cold and wet against the snow, leaving a small imprint that melted slowly. They were all females, I realized later, sisters and daughters, abandoned together in a cruel twist of fate, their bond unbroken despite the betrayal that had stranded them here, much like family units in Siberian lore where the pack's unity meant survival against the elements, a legacy of cooperation. No collars, no tags, just these magnificent creatures left to freeze, their paws crusted with ice from whatever desperate trek they'd made before collapsing here, perhaps following a false promise of warmth or fleeing some unseen threat deeper in the woods, their nails worn from scraping over rocks. I glanced around. The road was empty, the forest a wall of white and shadowed trunks stretching endlessly in all directions. No tire tracks leading away recently, only the faint impressions of paws leading from deeper in the woods, trailing like a story half told in the dim light. No one coming back for them, that much was clear, the isolation amplifying their plight in the vast, uncaring night that pressed in from every side. My hands trembled as I reached into my coat pocket for the half-eaten sandwich from lunch, ham and cheese on stale bread, wrapped in wax paper that crinkled in the quiet, and broke it up into small pieces, tossing them gently their way, watching them land softly in the snow like offerings from a stranger's hand. The crumbs dusted white instantly. The mother sniffed cautiously at the offering, her nose twitching with discernment, nostrils flaring to catch the scent amid the pine and cold, then ate with deliberate bites, her trust tentative but real, a spark of hope in her posture as her ears relaxed forward, tail giving a slight lift. The others followed her lead, the pup snapping at the crumbs with a hunger that twisted my gut like a knife, her tiny jaws working furiously, bits of bread clinging to her muzzle as she licked her chops, her tail giving a tentative wag that stirred the snow around her into tiny eddies. I couldn't leave them. Not like that. Not when their eyes begged for a chance I knew too well the cost of denying, the finality of being overlooked and life's vast indifference weighing on me like the storm itself, heavy and unrelenting. Scooping up the pup first, her fur soft and surprisingly warm despite the cold, her tiny body fitting perfectly in my arms like she belonged there from the start, her heart racing against my chest in rapid thuds that synced with my own accelerating pulse. I carried her to the truck, murmuring soothing nonsense to keep her calm, words like, "It's okay, little one, I've got you now," blending with the wind that tugged at us both. She didn't fight or squirm. She just nestled against my chest, those husky eyes half closing in relief, her fluffy tail giving a weak thump against my side, a sign of emerging trust that warmed me more than the cab's heater struggling to life. The mother was next, heavier with her solid frame built for pulling loads across ice, her muscles lean and wiry under the thick fur that was designed for sub-zero survival, trapping air like insulation against the freeze. But she walked with me willingly, her steps measured and purposeful, glancing back at her family with a protective sweep of her gaze that scanned the shadows for any lingering danger, her ears swiveling. The other two followed without hesitation, their paws crunching through the deepening snow with determined pushes that left deeper prints in the drift, tails low but not tucked in fear, their bodies moving with that innate husky grace even in exhaustion, a remnant of their ancestral poise on sled paths worn by centuries of travel over frozen rivers. Huskies are like that, stoic, resilient, with a spirit that whispers adventure even in the worst storms, their heritage from Siberian sled teams making them tougher than they look, capable of running 100 miles a day in real Iditarod races, pulling supplies through conditions that would break lesser breeds, their stamina a legend among northern peoples. I got them all in the back seat, layering my coat and a worn blanket from the trunk over them, tucking it around their forms to trap the heat, careful to avoid tangling their legs or pressing too close, giving them space to adjust without crowding. The cab filled with their warmth almost immediately, their quiet pants syncing with the rhythm of the engine, a chorus of life amid the howl outside that battered the windows with fists of snow, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel so alone, as if their presence had filled a void I hadn't realized was echoing so loudly, resonating through the metal frame and into my bones. Driving back was a white-knuckle affair, the storm raging like it was testing my resolve, gusts rocking the truck side to side and visibility dropping to mere feet, forcing me to lean forward over the wheel, eyes straining against the white curtain that veiled the road ahead. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, watching them settle into the space, the mother's watchful eyes meeting mine every time. A silent acknowledgement passing between us, her head tilting as if to say, "We're in this together now." No turning back, her expression calm amid the chaos. The pup dozed fitfully, her breaths evening out into soft rhythms that rose and fell gently, a soothing counterpoint to the engine's rumble, while the sisters shifted closer together, their fur brushing in quiet reassurance, occasional licks exchanged like family rituals passed down through instinct, grooming away the remnants of ice. Huskies have this energy, this quiet intelligence. They don't yap like other dogs, filling the air with noise. They communicate in looks, in the way their ears perk or their bodies lean into the space, conveying trust or wariness without a sound, a subtlety that makes them ideal for long hauls in silence, as mushers in the Arctic have relied on for navigation through endless white expanses. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the porch light flickering like a beacon through the flurry, casting golden pools on the snow that glittered like scattered diamonds under the faint moon. Emma was at the window, her small face pressed against the glass, eyes wide with a mix of worry and curiosity, her breath fogging the pane in little clouds as she wiped it clear with her sleeve. Pajamas rumpled from waiting up past her bedtime. "Mom? What's that noise outside? Like something moving in the snow? And why are you so late? The snow's everywhere, and I was scared you'd get stuck out there alone," she asked as I bundled the huskies inside one by one, the warmth of our little home. A cozy two-bedroom with mismatched furniture gathered from yard sales and the faint smell of last night's vegetable soup, still lingering from the pot on the stove, mixed with the woodsy scent of the dogs. A stark contrast to the night outside, steam rising from their coats as the heat hit them, melting the ice into droplets that pattered on the floor like gentle rain starting to fall. Emma was 8, all freckles scattered like stars across her nose and braids tied with faded ribbons from birthdays past. with her dad's stubborn chin that set when she was determined about something, a trait that shone in her questions and the way she crossed her arms. She'd been quiet since the divorce, drawing pictures of families that included ghosts where her father should be, her crayons capturing the ache in soft grays and blues, pages filled with sled dogs she'd seen in books as stand-ins for stability, dreaming of adventures to fill the gaps left by absence. I set the pup down first on the threadbare rug by the door, and Emma gasped, her hands flying to her mouth in delight, kneeling instantly to reach out a tentative hand. "They're beautiful. Look at their eyes, like the sky on a clear day after the rain, so bright and deep. Are they ours? Can we keep them, please? They look so cold and tired. See how they're shaking and their fur is all wet?" "Not yet, kiddo," I said, kneeling to rub the mother's ears gently, feeling the soft velvet of them under my fingers, warm now from the indoors and starting to thaw, the texture a comfort against my calloused hands. The husky leaned into my touch without pulling away, her eyes softening just a fraction, that deep blue pulling me in like an invitation to share burdens, her body relaxing incrementally as the tension from the cold began to ebb. "But they're staying tonight, at least. Someone left them out there to die in the cold. Can you imagine how scared they must have been, all alone in the dark with the wind howling?" We got them fresh water in chipped bowls from the cabinet, filling them from the tap with a splash that echoed in the sink, and more food, canned tuna from the pantry, flaked hastily with a fork over the sink, the metallic scent filling the air and drawing their noses upward, and watched as they devoured it with focused intensity, tails thumping softly against the floor in gratitude, the sound like a gentle drum beat echoing in the quiet room, building a rhythm of home. The pup, whom Emma dubbed Spark because of her bright, sparkling eyes that caught the lamplight and danced with it like fireflies in summer, tumbled over her own paws in excitement, playful even in her exhaustion, her husky heritage showing in the way she bounced back with resilient energy, nipping at the air as if chasing snowflakes indoors, her little growls more enthusiastic than fierce, inviting Emma to join. The sisters, Frost with her icy white patches that gleamed under the bulb like fresh frost on a window, and Echo with subtler gray tones blending into shadows cast by the furniture, explored cautiously at first, their noses twitching at the unfamiliar smells of our home. Dinner remnants on the counter from earlier, Emma's crayons scattered on the table in colorful disarray, the faint lavender from my soap in the bathroom wafting through the hall, before settling near the heater vent, their sleek forms relaxing inch by inch, paws stretching out as if claiming territory with quiet confidence. Luna, I'd started calling the mother that in my head, after the moon that had peeked through the clouds during the drive, guiding us home like a lantern in the void, its pale light a promise. Stayed close to me, her head resting on my knee as I sat on the floor amid the chaos of towels and bowls, as if saying, "Thank you for seeing us when no one else did," her warmth seeping through my jeans and grounding me in the moment. That night, as Emma drifted off to sleep in her room with Spark curled at her feet like a living teddy bear, the pup's gentle snores a new lullaby mingling with the wind outside that rattled the panes like distant thunder, I sat on the couch with Luna's head heavy in my lap, the weight of her a comforting anchor against the uncertainties swirling in my mind like eddies in a stream. The house felt different, fuller, alive with their soft breaths and the occasional thump of a tail against the cushions, the silence no longer oppressive but shared, punctuated by the distant creak of settling snow on the roof and the faint tick of the clock marking time's slow passage. I stroked her fur, thick and insulating like a winter coat woven for endurance, running my fingers through the layers that had shielded her from the storm, parting the guard hairs to feel the dense undercoat beneath, soft as down and warm to the touch, and whispered about my own losses into the dim light of a single lamp that cast warm glows on the walls, shadows dancing gently. We both got left behind, huh? Dumped out in the cold without a backward glance, wondering if anyone would come looking, if we'd ever feel whole again after the breaking. She looked up at me, ears twitching slightly in response to my tone, and I swear she understood. Her gaze steady and empathetic, reflecting back a quiet solidarity that bridged our worlds without effort. Huskies are empaths in fur coats. They sense the hurt and mirror it back with unwavering loyalty, their pack instincts drawing them to the wounded like a magnet, a quality that's made them legends in stories from Alaskan villages where they nursed orphaned children through fevers, providing comfort in the harshest nights with their vigilant watch. The next morning brought reality crashing in like the sunlight piercing the curtains, harsh and unavoidable, casting long shadows across the floor where the huskies stirred, stretching with yawns that revealed sharp teeth glinting in the light. Calls to the local shelter, where the voice on the line sounded weary from too many sad stories of winter intakes and lost pets calling in the night. The vet, whose waiting room always smelled of antiseptic and wet dog fur with magazines dog-eared from anxious waits by owners pacing the linoleum. Turns out no one had reported missing huskies in the area. No frantic owners posting flyers on the community board or social media groups buzzing with searches and pleas accompanied by blurry photos. They were strays now, or rescues, depending on how you looked at it, their fate hanging in the balance of bureaucracy and space, papers shuffling in overfilled files that overflowed with similar cases from the season's toll. The shelter was full to bursting, euthanizing lists growing longer with each passing week, stories of overworked staff making tough calls that haunted my thoughts, decisions weighed against limited kennels and resources strained by the season's surge in abandonments. The thought of sending them there into that cold finality of tiled floors and echoing barks that masked deeper sorrows of separation. No, I couldn't bear it. The image, too close to my own fears of loss and irretrievable goodbyes that still lingered from Tom's exit. My job at the diner barely paid the bills, with tips drying up in the winter slowdown when tourists stayed home huddled by their fires, reading books instead of venturing out. But Emma's face lit up like I'd given her the stars when she woke to find them still there, her hugs fierce around Spark's neck, pulling the pup into a giggling tangle on the rug that shook with their joy. Please, Mom. They're like us. Family now. The kind that sticks around no matter what, through the storms and the quiet days alike. And just like that, the decision settled in my bones. Heavy, but right. A commitment born from that shared night in the snow, echoing commitments in real-life adoption stories where single parents find strength in furry additions, turning houses into homes one paw print at a time, building legacies from small acts. But it wasn't all fairy tale warmth and instant bonds that clicked into place overnight, seamless as a well-worn path underfoot. Huskies are working dogs at heart, high-energy dynamos with a pack mentality that demands structure and space, not the confines of a small apartment yard fenced with chain link that rattled in the wind and limited their runs to short bursts. Luna tested me from day one, chewing the edge of a slipper here with precise tugs that left neat fringes on the leather, hurting Emma a little too firmly during playtime there, her authoritative nips gentle but insistent, reminding everyone of her role as alpha through subtle corrections that established order without chaos. I'd find her staring out the window at dawn, those blue eyes distant and yearning, like she was remembering the wild freedom of open trails or the bite of wind on her face during some forgotten run. Her nose pressed to the glass, leaving foggy prints that I'd wipe away later with a cloth, tracing the shape. Spark, the pup, was a whirlwind of husky mischief, nipping at heels with her sharp baby teeth that left tiny marks on socks and ankles, zooming around the yard in endless circles, her fluffy tail a blur of motion that left muddy paw prints on the back door and scattered toys in her wake. her energy a constant reminder of youth's unbridled spirit demanding outlets. Frost and Echo were the quiet ones, shadows following Luna's lead with unwavering devotion, their sleek forms gliding through the snow. We got after that first storm, their subtle markings blending with the landscape like camouflage artists, alert to squirrels in the branches above, or the rustle of leaves in the undergrowth stirred by small creatures. Training them meant long walks in the biting cold, bundled up against the wind in layers of scarves and gloves that muffled my hands and made treats hard to grasp. Teaching commands like sit and stay with treats. Bits of chicken jerky that I'd save from my shifts, portioned out carefully to avoid overfeeding and maintain discipline, and patience I didn't know I had, drawing from stories I'd read about real-life sled dog rescues in Alaska, where mushers turned strays into teams through sheer persistence and daily routines that built trust layer by layer, rewarding small victories with praise that echoed in the crisp air and reinforced the pack dynamic. There were nights when the howling started, that haunting, husky song echoing through the house, a chorus that rose and fell like a call to the wild, vibrating through the walls and stirring the neighborhood dogs into a distant reply that blended into the night. And I'd wake up wondering if I'd bitten off more than I could chew, the sound stirring memories of my own restless nights filled with what-ifs and half-formed dreams of escape. One evening, about a week in, things got real in a way that tested the fragile newness of our bond, pushing us to the edges where vulnerability meets resolve in raw honesty. Emma had a meltdown after school, triggered by a classmate's story of a family vacation to warmer places with beaches and sun, screaming about her dad not calling again on her birthday, her small fists pounding the kitchen table until her knuckles turned red, tears streaming down her flushed cheeks in hot trails that soaked her collar and dripped onto the wood. I held her close, rocking her on the linoleum floor amid scattered homework papers fluttering like fallen leaves in a breeze, but the words stuck in my throat, caught on my own unresolved anger that bubbled up unbidden, a mix of sorrow and frustration tangled together. Luna sensed it from across the room, where she'd been dozing by the fridge with one eye half open on the world, padding over with that deliberate husky grace, her nails clicking softly on the wood like a measured heartbeat announcing her approach without alarm. She nudged Emma gently with her nose, cold and reassuring against the girl's skin flushed with emotion, then lay down right there, offering her belly up in submission, a rare thing for a lead female like her, a gesture of pure vulnerability that spoke volumes about her capacity for empathy, exposing her soft underbelly and trust that invited reciprocity. Emma buried her face in Luna's fur, sobbing into the silver-gray warmth that smelled of earth and faint wildness, the husky's coat absorbing the tears like a sponge, and the husky just stayed there, steady as the North Star, her breathing even and reassuring, one paw resting lightly on Emma's arm as if to hold her steady through the waves. "She's like a mom," Emma whispered later once the storm had passed and the kitchen quieted to sniffles and sighs, stroking those silver hairs with tentative fingers, a small smile breaking through the residue of hurt like sunlight after rain-piercing clouds. In that moment, watching them intertwined on the floor, the light from the overhead bulb casting soft halos around their forms, I felt the ice around my heart crack a little more, the pain easing under the weight of their quiet strength. A healing that mirrored accounts from therapy dogs in hospitals where pause and presence mend what words can't, fostering connections that endure beyond the session. These dogs weren't just survivors scraping by on instinct alone. They were healers, their loyalty a balm for wounds I hadn't named, teaching me that compassion flows both ways in unexpected currents, rippling through the everyday like hidden streams. As winter deepened its grip, blanketing everything in layers of fresh powder that crunched underfoot like brittle glass and muffled the world into hushed tones, Broken only by the occasional snap of a branch under the weight, we fell into a rhythm that felt almost natural, like we'd always been this way, woven together by routine and shared glances that spoke volumes. Mornings meant snowball chases in the yard after breakfast, the air crisp with the promise of frost that nipped at exposed skin and turned breaths to vapor. Spark darting like a comet through the drifts, her husky endurance seemingly endless as she leaped and twisted mid-air, snow flying in arcs that caught the light, while Frost and Echo loped alongside with measured strides, tongues lolling in rare displays of joy, their breaths forming clouds in the crisp air that hung like speech bubbles frozen in time, dissolving slowly. Luna preferred the quiet times, sitting with me on the porch as I sipped coffee from a chipped mug, steam curling up to meet the cold and mingle with my exhales in lazy spirals, her head resting on my boot while I watched the sun rise over the treetops, painting the snow in pinks and golds that reflected off her fur like a crown. We'd talk, I'd talk, pouring out the day's worries or old regrets about paths not taken and chances missed in the rush of life, and she'd listen without interruption, her presence a steady comfort that absorbed the words like a sponge, her occasional sigh syncing with mine in perfect harmony. I told her about the lonely nights after Tom left, how I'd stare at the ceiling, wondering if I was enough for Emma, if I could rebuild without crumbling under the weight, the doubts that whispered in the dark like shadows lengthening across the room. You get it, don't you? That feeling of being left to fend for yourself, piecing together a new normal from fragments scattered wide. I'd say, and her eyes would meet mine, that deep blue conveying a yes without words, her ear flicking as if in agreement, a subtle nod to the bond forming between us, deepening with each dawn. Huskies don't need speeches. Their presence is the conversation, a silent dialogue built on shared silences and subtle cues, much like the quiet companionship in memoirs from Yukon trappers who credited their huskies with keeping sanity in isolation, their howls a bridge to the human soul across vast distances. There were challenges, sure, woven into the fabric of our days like threads in a tapestry, adding texture without unraveling the whole, each one a lesson in adaptability and grace under pressure. The vet bills stacked up quickly, invoices arriving like unwelcome guests in the mail slot. Spark had developed a persistent cough from the initial cold exposure, her little chest heaving until antibiotics cleared it, rounds of checkups confirming her recovery with stethoscope presses and gentle prods that made her squirm, and Luna needed a full round of shots and deworming, her strong frame hiding the toll of neglect with parasites picked up from the wild, requiring careful monitoring with follow-up visits. I picked up extra shifts at the diner, feet aching from hours on the concrete floor, slick with spills and tracked-in slush from boots, grease staining my apron and lingering on my skin long after washing with harsh soap. But coming home to those wagging tails, vigorous sweeps that cleared coffee tables of remotes and coasters, sending them skittering across the wood, made it bearable, a reward in fur and enthusiasm that chased away the fatigue like a warm embrace wrapping around the weary. One blizzard hit hard that season, fiercer than the first, with winds that howled like banshees through the eaves and rattled the shutters. Power out for 3 long days and nights, the world reduced to candlelight flickering on walls adorned with family drawings and the crackle of our fireplace fed with scavenged logs from the backyard pile stacked against the shed. We huddled together in the living room, the 4 huskies piled around us like a living blanket, their bodies pressed close in a circle of warmth that radiated outward, paws overlapping in a tangle of fur and trust. Their heat, that husky heat, built for Arctic trails and pulling sleds across frozen tundras in races like the Serum Run of 1925 where they delivered life-saving medicine through impossible odds, kept us from shivering too badly, a natural furnace against the dropping temperatures that dipped below zero, frost forming on the windows like intricate lace patterns. Emma read stories by flashlight from her favorite book about Iditarod races. her voice weaving tales of brave sled dogs and shimmering northern lights that danced like spirits in the sky above the trail. The husky's ears perking at the familiar sounds of adventure, tails twitching in response as if remembering their own lineage of endurance. For the first time, our home felt like a true pack, bound by something stronger than blood, resilient in the face of the storm's fury, sharing stories passed down from indigenous cultures where huskies were family woven into survival, guardians of the hearth against the encroaching dark. If you found this story helpful, please give it a 1 in the comments. If not, give it a 0. Your response will let me know if my story helped anyone. Spring teased us early that year, melting the snow into muddy streams that trickled down the hillsides and turned the yard into a soppy mess, the air filling with the earthy scent of thawing ground mixed with the first hints of green shoots pushing through, resilient against the last frosts that clung stubbornly. By then, the huskies had claimed us fully, their personalities blooming like the first crocuses defying the residual chill, each one carving a unique space in our days with quirks that became endearing routines, from Spark's morning zoomies to Luna's evening watches. Luna led the walks with unerring confidence, her stride purposeful along the winding paths that wound through the woods alive with returning life and the chatter of awakening creatures, the others falling in line like a well-oiled team, their paws padding in sync to the rhythm of birdsong returning from southern winters, a melody of renewal. Spark had grown out of her puppy phase, her fluffy coat giving way to the lean, athletic lines of a young husky, full of boundless energy that matched Emma's infectious laughter as they raced through the greening fields, chasing butterflies emerging from cocoons and leaves rustling in the breeze that carried promises. Frost and Echo, with their subtle black and white markings that evoked winter's remnants fading into renewal, became the steadfast guardians, alert to every passing car rumbling down the road, or unfamiliar scent on the breeze carried from neighboring farms with their budding orchards heavy with potential, but melting into affectionate puddles at our feet, rolling for belly rubs with contented sighs that rumbled deep in their chests, vibrations felt through the grass like Earth's own pulse. I started noticing changes in myself, subtle at first, like the way I lingered longer on the porch at dusk, breathing deeper into the softening evenings filled with the hum of insects awakening, the tightness in my chest loosening with each passing week as if knots were untying. The grief didn't vanish overnight, but it softened around the edges, shared in the way Luna would lean against me during quiet evenings by the window watching fireflies flicker like stars fallen low. Her loyalty, a quiet promise that echoed real-life tales I'd heard from other rescuers at adoption events, of dogs pulling families from emotional winters with their steadfast hearts, fostering growth in unexpected soils rich with possibility. One afternoon, as we hiked the trails behind the house, wild paths lined with budding ferns unfurling like green scrolls, and the distant call of birds returning north from their migrations, their songs a symphony of comeback weaving through the air. Something shifted deep inside, a quiet epiphany amid the rustle of leaves and the scent of damp moss clinging to rocks, grounding the moment. The dogs ranged ahead with joyful abandon, exploring scents and sounds with tails high and alert, Luna pausing every so often to look back over her shoulder, ensuring we followed, her blue eyes a beacon of inclusion that scanned the group with maternal care, drawing us onward. Emma skipped along the uneven ground, roots twisting like veins underfoot, and wildflowers nodding in the light dappling through branches, tossing sticks for Spark, who bounded after them with that signature husky leap, muscles rippling under her fur as she soared and returned, stick clamped triumphantly in her jaws, dropping it at Emma's feet with a proud tilt of her head and a playful bow that invited another throw. I lagged behind, boots sinking into the soft earth that yielded like memory foam, watching the scene unfold like a painting coming to life before me. colors vivid in the dappled light filtering through canopy overhead. And it hit me. This was healing in its truest form. Not the dramatic, movie script kind with swelling music and tidy resolutions tied with bows of convenience, but the slow, steady thaw that comes from daily acts of care, moments stacked like bricks into a new foundation, sturdy against winds that once howled unchecked. These 4 Siberian huskies, abandoned in the snow without mercy or reason, had pulled me from my own emotional drift, their unwavering presence a testament to resilience that outshone the cold, their barks and bounds a language of hope speaking directly to the soul. Their eyes, those piercing blues that had first locked onto mine in the storm, had seen my pain and stayed anyway, offering verity and compassion in every glance, a depth that recalled historical accounts of huskies in expeditions like Scott's Antarctic Trek, where their endurance inspired human fortitude amid despair and isolation. It reminded me of stories from husky breeders in the Yukon, where the breed's history of guiding lost travelers through blizzards underscored their role as not just companions but saviors in fur, bridging the gap between isolation and connection with paws that tread lightly on fragile hearts, leaving trails of light. Years later, looking back from the warmth of a life reshaped by time and tenderness, layered with memories that have deepened like roots anchoring a tree, that fateful night feels like the pivot point, the axis on which everything turned toward light, illuminating paths I couldn't have foreseen in the dimness of then. Luna lived to 12, a queen till the very end, her final days spent with her head in my lap on the same couch worn from years of gatherings and spilled snacks during movie nights, eyes still holding that ancient wisdom as she slipped away peacefully, surrounded by her pack and the soft hum of family voices sharing anecdotes of her adventures, her passing marked by a quiet vigil under starlit skies that seemed to honor her journey with a canopy of twinkling witnesses. Spark grew into a speedy explorer, leading Emma on adventures through the woods with maps drawn in notebooks filled with sketches and notes on landmarks, her energy a spark that ignited dreams of far-off places and new horizons, from local trails to imagined sled routes across imagined snows. Frost and Echo remained the steadfast companions, their quiet vigilance a constant in our changing world, outliving the others with grace, their later years filled with gentle laps around the yard chasing falling leaves in autumn gales and sun-soaked naps on the porch, tails thumping lazily in contentment. They taught me forgiveness, not just for the one who left us in pieces, scattering our world like shattered glass across the floor to be swept up slowly, but for myself, for the doubts that had chained me down and dimmed my steps, allowing shadows to linger too long in the corners. And Emma, she's got her own spark now, a teenager dreaming of vet school with sketches of sled teams in her notebooks, inspired by the pack that saved us when we needed it most. Her laughter filling the house like sunlight streaming through open windows on lazy mornings, carrying forward the legacy of that winter's gift into brighter tomorrows filled with purpose. So here we are, you and me, sharing this over whatever quiet moment you've carved out in your day, perhaps with a warm drink in hand, or the soft light of evening settling like a blanket. If there's a lesson hidden in that long-ago snow, it's this. Sometimes the miracles find you when you're just trying to get home, unassuming and profound, arriving on paws that leave prints on the heart, indelible and true. And once they do, you hold on tight, letting their warmth reshape the cold places inside, one shared breath at a time, until the landscape of your soul blooms anew with colors you never imagined.